Good morning, everybody. How lovely that there's so many of us online from all over the world. This morning, we're going to hear about Jack Lunzer, who I won't say anything about him, but Mira, one of his 5 daughters, will be telling us something about his life. Mira is a scientist as well as a daughter, a mother of 4 and grandmother of nearly 6 grandchildren. And there's loads to tell. So I'll put you straight over to Mira to start. Mira, it's over to you.
Thank you for asking me to speak about my father. And it's always a privilege to talk about him. It is such fun. When my son Alex graduated from Birmingham University, Crown Princess of Lesotho gave the guest lecture, and I'd like to quote, "People may wish you good luck on your future, on your exams, on your project, on your life. I wish you the ability to recognize the opportunity that comes your way, capture it with both arms, and drive it forward." From a very young age, our father did exactly that. The word entrepreneur is a French word first used in 1723, implying qualities of leadership, initiative, innovation, and risk. In Great Britain, it came to mean an adventurer. Our father was born in Antwerp in 1924, a location he always tried to hide. He wanted to be English, more English than English. He was born the 7th of 8 children, and throughout his life, he managed to use circumstances into an adventure or an opportunity that inevitably affected his life for the good. Ill health took him to Switzerland at an early age, where, when hospitalized, he managed to learn Swiss German, French, and Italian in order to be able to communicate with the nurses. He'd already heard German at home. The same ill health prevented him enlisting, and he was really, really upset about that. So instead, he had to join the civil service and go to the Home Security, and he felt always embarrassed that he did that. But before that, he was evacuated to Letchworth. And in Letchworth, he took that opportunity to explore the neighbors. One of the most famous neighbors that he had was David Sassoon, who taught him the beginnings of his love for books. If there is one word that describes the fundamental trait in entrepreneurship, it would be passion. This passion can take many forms, keeps you awake at night, and one continues to improve again and again and again. Our father acquired a passion for horse riding, books, plants, all sorts of things when he was in Letchworth. He acquired a passion for opera, especially listening to the BBC. But this wasn't good enough for him. He had to get to the Royal Opera House. How was he going to fund this in the meager war years? He noticed that the milk carts pulled by the horses left telltale droppings. So he collected these and went door to door, selling manure to the local households for their roses. His intro into horticulture. So from milk carts to stables at McAlpines in Henley-on-Thames, from radio to Royal Opera House, the passion was fueled and the path was clear. I'd like to read you from when he passed. Rabbi Jeremy Rosen wrote a very nice obituary, and it really sums him up. To those of us who knew him, Jack the Man was one of the most interesting, multifaceted persons you could come across. When you met him, you would never know which persona you might encounter: the international diamond dealer, the Orthodox Jewish follower of Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch in Frankfurt, a generous philanthropist, a Yekker, an English gentleman, a Yiddish-speaking Belgian, the Italian count, the African diplomat, the opera buff, philatelist, horse rider, skier, horticulturalist, man about town, bon vivant, joker, pious Jew, I would never really call him that, and scholar. But he was all of those and more, not to mention the doting father of 5 special girls. But behind every so that is my father walking with his parents, and we're guessing it's Knocker. But please note that the men are not wearing hats. My grandparents were extremely Orthodox, but that was the way. Life was good. And my father sorry, I've lost a page. So when he was kicked out of the army, in fact, he went for his checkup, and he failed the medicals through having various diseases. He was then apprenticed to GC, and it was just want to say hello to my younger sister, Caroline, who I can see has just joined. So he was apprenticed to GC, and it was where he learnt his initial trade of the use of industrial diamonds for all sorts of interesting applications in.
May I say something, Mira?
Yes.
When they were in Letchworth, because he wasn't allowed to go into the army because he had various illnesses in his youth which affected his lungs, he worked in the Spirella factory, and he also took an apprenticeship there in the make and the fabric of the application of these diamonds, and which was particularly useful in the war industry because of all the applications that these industrial diamonds had in the war effort. And that's what I just wanted to say there. I'm going, bye.
Thank you, Margaret. And anybody who wants to talk, please feel free to do so. So, where was I? So, after the war, he settled down working with his father in Hatton Garden. His father was a diamond dealer, what my father would call Jewish diamonds. And he always was restless. He didn't like it too much, but he was stuck in Hatton Garden and got on with it. And he then built up his own business of industrial diamonds. Now, industrial diamonds are the same as ordinary diamonds, but they've got impurities in them. And if you look at these, they don't look diamond-like at all, except the ones at the back. But we remember as children, he would come back with little envelopes. He was always sorting them. He would come back with little envelopes and open up the envelope, and there would be flecks of yellow in them. There would be stones. They looked like pebbles. But these he crushed. He was one of the first to crush the diamonds for use in abrasives. And Margaret can tell you all about that because her husband's her husband went into that business. So I'll come back to that. But behind every great man is a great woman. And he met my mother in 1948. He gate crashed a little party.
He didn't gate crash. He didn't gate crash. He was invited to Francis and Boy Weingarten.
No, he gate crashed, Margaret. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But he went to Francis and Boy Weingarten in Norrisley, where my mother was there, and it was like an instant attraction, let's say. So they were quite a glamorous pair, the two of them. And my mother had come to meet her brother, who's on the left in this photo. And that was both my parents with my grandmother and uncle. And they got married. And this is at their wedding day, my mother's 4 brothers. Here's the oldest, is that one, 2, 3, 4. So, and they've all got moustaches. And we all make fun of them because and my father's family. So these are my father's oldest brother, Henry, oldest sister, Evelyn. Evelyn was the oldest. Some of you might know who some of them were. That was Peter Lunzer in New York. Joan lives in Jerusalem. She's the only survivor now. And again, note, nobody's wearing a kippah, but my grandmother was wearing a shaitel.
So was Auntie Evelyn.
So was Auntie Evelyn, yeah. And my mother's quite a characterful family, larger than life. Now my mother, my mother would speak to that sister in German. She would speak to that brother in English, and these 3, a mixture of Italian and German. And we heard languages all the time, and they all had nicknames for each other. And it was, my mother was the youngest, and they treated her like the queen. She was absolutely the treasure of treasures. And it was quite interesting. They were fur traders and would come in to London on the way to Russia to go and buy furs. So there was lots going on in the house, and it was always a jolly place. So we used to have huge Purim parties, and my father would always dress up in a whole variety of things, as did we. And there were queues down the road to come and watch us at Purim. So they were always traveling, always glamorous, always doing things. And they were one of the first pairs to go to the Far East. This was, and when they went to the Far East, Margaret and I, Fiona, the 4 of us, I don't think Caroline was even born yet. Were you, Caroline? Oh, she's gone. The 4 of us were sent on summer holidays to Wengen. There was a kosher hotel there, and they went off to the Far East. And when they came back, my mother hated it, absolutely hated it. She hated seeing the poverty. She hated the filth. She hated the food. She hated every single bit of it, which was a shame because my father was really, really excited about all of that. But the one thing, pardon?
She missed us. She missed us. She missed us.
Oh, I'm sure she missed us, but it was an exciting opportunity for them. And one thing that always figured in everything was our house. It was called Fairport, which was interesting, that it was really the center of everything. So my father had plenty of place to develop his horticulture thrills, and everybody who knew us and the garden would know how he loved the roses from Harkness, the rhododendrons from Exbury. So everything had to be at the top level. And he was always ambitious, passionate. Everything he did to absolute level. And in fact, in the latter years, he ran out of room in Fairport on the Hampstead Heath. So he had to take his passion for rhododendrons to Golders Hill Park. And if anybody ever goes to Golders Hill Park, you will notice as you come in by the gardeners' houses and so on, all the banks of rhododendrons and camellias and magnolias and all of that is all being put in by my father. He had really ideas of grandeur. You know, a small suburban house wasn't really good enough for him. He really wanted a big estate. But we always had dogs. This is my little sister Fiona on the right and Alison on the left. And we had Jimmy the dog. Now, Jimmy was a Scottish Sealyham who loved to sit underneath the car. So although he was supposed to be white, he was always oily. And my father actually ran him over and killed him one day when we were going to school because he insisted on running after us. And instead of telling us that he was dead, he drove him with us to the veterinary college in Gray's Inn Road. No, it wasn't Gray's Inn, right near Gray's Inn, by King's Cross, the veterinary hospital there. And then he told us, and Margaret will remember this best of all, he told us that he had got married and Pesach time, he got married and found and they had a baby and he bought a replacement from Harrods in a little basket. But Jimmy came when we had scarlet fever. We were quarantined for 6 weeks with scarlet fever.
Do you remember our scarlet fever, Mira? Mummy had to come into a room with a gown on, and I think one of our sisters was very little.
And think how long we've quarantined now, but we missed a whole term of school.
But the first time you and I fought, Mummy was so excited because she said, oh, they're better, because we had a fight. Yeah.
Anyway.
Look at the previous pictures, Mira. The previous pictures of Golders Hill Park. Look. No, it's not. Is it Golders Hill Park or when you went on one of your travels?
Yeah, the one in the middle is
Water. It's Virginia Water.
Oh, yeah. We got a photo when we went there all together.
Yes, but how many photos?
Is that Alex in the green jacket behind him, I think? Look, possibly.
Yes, you're right. You're right. So, meanwhile, my father built his business up, determined with discipline and dedication. And he built it up going to street services, and wherever he went, whatever he did, he always looked up, looked in the address book for the nearest shul, the nearest rabbi, whether there was a chance of finding some Jewish connection. And would they have some Jewish books there? But so in the course of that, and we have South Africa on the line, who knows the stories of my father, in the course of my father began to build his reputation, took on De Beers, the De Beers Diamond Cartel, and won. So I'm going to quote from Neil, who was a financial reporter. De Beers then controlled more than 4/5 of the world diamond production, worth billions of dollars. And it supported gem prices with a monopoly of producers. Zaire suddenly had the cartel. It chose Lunzer, who joined by 2 other independent dealers. One of them was Star Diamonds. The global diamond, jewellery and mining communities were stunned. A few years later, De Beers persuaded Zaire to enter its fold, but Lunzer's pioneer work in creating a free global diamond market had taken hold. And it was the beginning of the end of the diamond cartel. Today, De Beers is still a flourishing business, and each year sells around 6 billion, roughly, rough uncut diamonds. But now it holds less than 60% of the market. And my father proved to be an irritant of De Beers ever since he established IDC Holdings, his diamond business, soon after World War II. And despite continuous pressure from De Beers, he encouraged miners from Africa, from Russia and Australia to value and sell at least some of their production independently. In that way, they would be able to receive the best prices for their gems and industrial diamonds. With a much smaller share of the market, De Beers had to stop supporting prices, and it now competes with other producers in selling gems to dealers in Antwerp, Tel Aviv, Bombay, and New York. Diamond prices still rise and fall in a more transparent market. But as I said, so he was going like to South Africa, and he would be talking to people and doing business, and he was traveling. This was my parents in Japan, in India, more Japan, and always my mother would want to be home. Always the Fairport and my mother were the rock that allowed him to travel and disappear the way he did, wherever he went. And then when he would come home, we would go riding, we would play in the garden. Life would go on, but one fatal Sunday afternoon, he had gone to Henley-on-Thames riding. It was in 1964. He fell from his horse in Henley-on-Thames, and this is him landing up at Hammersmith Hospital, having broken his femur, and he had specially made high boots, high riding boots, and the whole riding gear. But he was such a pedant of what he looked wearing, very smart and so on. He loved those boots that he demanded that the ambulance people who came to help take him back to London would not slice the boot so that he would have to throw them away. And they literally pulled them off his feet. So you can imagine the pain. And my mother said she held his leg all the way back to London, and every bump in the road, and they weren't the motorways they are now, every bump in the road, he would shout in pain. More of Fairport flowers. So we girls were the centre of really their lives. And who's laughing?
Margaret's laughing because my father was fascinated with Salzburg. Here we are, we're wearing dirndls, for God's sake. And he brought them back for us. Mummy was away. She was away with Dr. Goldscheider and Oscar Koschka. And my father decided that we had to have a musical soiree. Do you remember Mira? Mira played the flute. I played the piano. Alison ground around on the violin, and Fiona played the piano. And we had to perform in our dirndls. That's what we're wearing. That's why it's so funny. There you go, on you go.
So everywhere we went, we were the 5 girls.
Caroline was a baby. That's why she's not on that photo.
Yes, but you see, so we learned that when we walked into school, the girls are arriving. when we walked in. But on the way there, we had something very special with him. On Rosh Chodesh, we were all at City of London, and on Rosh Chodesh, if it was during the week, he would sometimes take us to the Savoy for breakfast. And we would march in one by one, all in our red uniforms, to the Savoy for breakfast. And on more mean days, he would drop us off, not at the Savoy, he would drop us off at the top of Fleet Street, and sometimes too early for school. So we would go into the local cafe, and we would say we felt quite deprived having to go there. And one day, it was Purim, as it is coming up now. It reminds me, we went in to hear the Megillah, and we had our City of London blazers on, which had a big cross on the front. And my father was called in as reprimanded by Rabbi Feldman, Rabbi Feldman. It's wonderful that he brings the girls in to shul for Megillah, but could he please make sure that we do not wear our blazers with a school cross on it? It was so.
Talking about the cross, Mira, if you remember, we used to go up to Jewish prayers up in the attic, in heaven, as we called it at City. We were in Carmelite Street. Sorry, I'm still eating my breakfast. But I said to my parents, or maybe Mira did, that it was really unfair because they all had hymnals and we didn't have SHtory. And so my parents commissioned this ruby red siddur for the girls for their prayers. And the school commissioned it, but we have a cross of St. George on the front of our siddur. It's this emblem of the City of London. So that's just amazing. Do you still have your siddur, Mira?
No, I do.
Somewhere.
No.
Do you remember it? Do you remember it, Mira?
Yes,
Anyhow.
yes, sure, I remember it. Yeah.
Good. On we go. She's very good, my sister. Look at Daddy.
So he was an adventurer. He taught me skiing, he taught all of us skiing, horse riding, swimming. He was a wonderful swimmer, and nothing he liked more was an adventure, really, and charming and chatting to everybody wherever he went. But there was something wonderful about him that the grandchildren will remember even more than we did. Michali, can you see who everybody is here? Do you recognize them? Michali, that's Alex, that's Ali, that's Selena.
Vicky.
That's your daddy, Joe, Andrew, Ruth, William, other Ruth, and she was the only one who was Sarah. So he taught us all, and it's gone on through all the children, the love of the garden. We would get pocket money for deadheading the roses and deadheading the rhododendrons. And still now, when I go anywhere in anybody's garden, walking down the street, and I see a dead rose, I have to deadhead it. When I have to deadhead the rhododendrons, I just have to do it. So when my father broke his hip, he couldn't go to shul, which he was very upset about. So he had constructed here this sunroom, and he started having a little minyan in his house. And that's how the minyan on Friday nights started there. And it became so popular that people from all over started coming. And it is known even now, when I go somewhere, I remember the minyan. Oh, it was so great. And he started finding little interesting pieces to put there. But this was built in Hampstead Garden suburb, and it was strictly against the law. And he fought for it to be put up there. It was quite, Chaim Bermant wrote of it frequently in the Jewish Chronicle, that people would be wandering around here on a nice hot summer's day, and on a nice hot Friday evening, and they'd be davening out here in the garden, wandering around, all the rest of it, and then come back and have a whiskey after the minyan. So he was, the bottom line is, he was really a family man, even though he was always traveling. And these are the future generations that hold on to some really wonderful memories of him. But one of the things somebody told him in, Frank Posen told him in Shul is, why don't you take your grandchildren away, just you and them? So he used to take them, he's taken them several times, on a boat in Turkey, on a gullet in Turkey, and it became so popular that actually some of us got allowed to come as well. So it was a wonderful thing. We've got, that was him at his most relaxed when he told us the best stories from way back to most recently. And he would try and learn Turkish. He would talk about all sorts of things, and we would cook and go in the water, and it was great time. But the thing that Joseph might remember and might like to talk about is going with him in Meir Sharim, where he had his mikveh. And Joseph, do you want to talk about the story of going to the mikveh with him? No? Margaret, do you want to talk about the mikveh?
I never went to the mikveh with him, but I know where it is. And the reason it's in Meir Sharim is because that was the Bate Ungarn that were built by his great uncle, Yitzhak Tzvi Ratzerstorfer, who was the brother of his grandmother. My grandfather, Hugo's mother, was Fanny Ratzerstorfer, and they were a well-known family in Bratislava, which is, Bratislava was Pressburg. Anyhow, Rabbi Sonnenfeld, who was the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, and our great uncle Tzvi Hirsch Ratzerstorfer built the Bate Ungarn in Mattersdorf, to look after the Jews of Meir Shorim. And this was the mikveh, because somebody came to them and said, we need a mikveh, but look how Lunzer's mikveh, look how it's spelled. Today we spell it Lamed, Vav, Nun, Tzadik, Resh. Of course, it's Yiddish, that they've got an ayin in it as well. But it's still there, and I'm happy to take you.
I went with Jack to the mikveh on a couple of occasions with.
But who's that? Bino?
Yeah, I went with him
Bino.
on a few occasions to the mikveh with Timmy. When it was first renovated, and then we needed, because it was in a terrible state.
Yeah.
I went with him. I can't remember exactly when this was. This is many years ago, and he paid for the renovation as well as the upkeep of it as well. I can remember that rabbi name.
Yeah. Thank you.
So
Well done.
my parents believed very, very much in the really traditional ways, Taras Mishpacha, education.
The men's mikveh, Mira.
I know that's a men's mikveh, but they believed in. I put that up because they didn't pay for a woman's mikveh, to my knowledge.
No, he paid for a men's mikveh.
Yeah.
It's still being used today.
Yeah, lucky them.
Yeah, exactly.
But I just want to refer back to their beliefs in education and true Torah values, because my mother's family introduced Lubavitch to Chabad, to Italy.
They brought Rabbi Gorelik over.
Pardon?
They brought Rabbi Gorelik over.
No, the
I
Rebbe
was
sent
just
him.
going to say, Rabbi Gorelik.
No, they
Rabbi
supported
Gorelik.
Rabbi Gorelik, but he was an absolute shliach of the Rebbe. Absolute shliach. And now that he just died, there was a lot of talk about him, but they supported him in Milan.
Yeah, oh yeah, very much so.
And that the shul is called the Viacellini, is called Or Yaakov, for
Yeah.
our grandfather.
So that was really my mother's influence on my father. And to this day, the only school, Lubavitch school, I can't say I'm so
Girls' school. Girls' school.
The Lubavitch Girls' School is in London, is named after her. But my parents really believed in education, in Torah values, and that's why the home was so important. So for all my father could travel and do and enjoy, he always had his family in
What a
mind.
lovely photo.
These are my father with his oldest brother, and say that's Henry Lunzer, and that's Peter from New York. So it left him traveling wherever he wanted to go. And often these people would come home back. So this is India, clearly. And he was,
Aridor mine.
pardon?
That's the Aridor mine. That's with Jeff and with Marcel. They're choosing the diamonds in the Aridor mine, our mine in Guinea.
Yeah.
That's in the Guinea. Here we are.
But all of it led to this. As much as he built up his business, he really, and he built up his library side by side. And rumor has it, and I just say it's rumor, that a lot of the books belong to my mother's family. It got Val Madonna. There's been lots discussed about it, but he says that, and it was quite interesting, that the basis of the collection was Italian. I don't want to go into it all because that's for another day, but the library holding 12,000 books dated right back to one of the most precious of his books was an 11th century English. Margaret's much more of an expert on the books than I am. 11th century English book printed in York.
Written, not printed.
Sorry, written in York before the expulsion.
Wallingford. That's where it was written.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it was before the expulsion from York. That's how old it is.
Yeah.
So we really considered the library was really our sixth sister. It was really, I remember my father, we could find him, he would be in the middle of the night, suddenly came in to wake us up because he'd found a new finding tucked in somewhere or a new whatever. He would be soaking them in the sink. He would be discussing them, whatever it was. Wherever he went, the books, the idea of the books went with. But what I'd like to point out is never mind the books. Wherever he went, he always had his white knitted, crocheted couple kippah on. That was one of his, that white safari suit, come what may, wearing these things, especially the white kippah. And all went, my father had just got up from sitting shiva for Uncle Henry, and he had to make the journey to New York for the opening of the exhibition. And I would say it was the pinnacle of his passions, really. Never mind us, never mind everything else, never mind the business. He had great pride in these books. Now, what was so interesting about her was the way he collected. Everybody collects in their own different way. He collected by geography, and that's what he felt very, very, very important.
Fine, thank you.
How's lockdown?
You know, can you go silent?
Not good.
Not good?
No, I'm ball
Bino,
stiff.
Bino,
But I'm
Bernard,
I'm going on
now
Aliyah.
can you mute?
Bino.
Yeah,
Can you mute, please?
I've actually got my visa. Please go to Israel, please go. I have three. I have
Sorry,
three
I
of my
apologise.
children.
Nino, time to switch off.
So
Yeah,
when are you planning on going?
within the next few weeks, I'm gonna be there for Facebook.
So, okay, I'll continue.
grandson,
Forget that. I'll talk over him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Velvet Trust Library
I'll probably
was
leave it
named.
to Leah because
Mira,
I've got
don't
one
go
in
over
Tel
him,
Aviv,
you
another in
can't.
Ra'anana.
Just wait.
Bernard,
I've got a
can you
daughter in
mute?
Zichron Yaakov.
Yeah, but can you not mute him?
I'll sort of be in the middle of
Can
all
you
of
not
them.
mute him?
Not anymore. So I'll have to organise that. But I'm aiming to go within the next shortly.
I'm sorry now you've all got this conversation about Bino.
I've muted him now, Bernard. Please go on.
Okay.
Please go on, Mira.
Okay, so the library has got numerous works, especially by Daniel Bomberg, who was the greatest printer, Hebrew printer of the 16th century. And my father quoted, Bomberg was his hero. He had a love affair with him for 50 years. And as a young man in Antwerp, he was given 4 million ducats to open a branch of the family banking and shipping business in Venice. Instead, he spent the money on printing Hebrew books of great beauty and accuracy. Isn't it interesting that he also started in Antwerp? The Valmadonna copy of the first edition of Bomberg's Biblia Rabbinica, 1516, 1517, is one of the rare examples of Renaissance Hebrew printing. So my father started collecting from Italy, from Constantinople, from India, from you name it in the world, wherever he was, he found books from there. And he built up it, and this was him in the library, in his home in Fairport. So they were 2 and 3 deep in, and this was a typical picture of him sitting in his favorite chair, his glasses in his mouth, reading bibliography. So it was very important to him that they were restored to their beautiful original condition. So the bindings are sometimes almost more valuable than the book themselves, because he wanted them all as treasures. But he still went, and he met a lot of interesting friends along the way. This is Christopher de Hamel, who was the bookie at Sotheby's, and he went with him to Switzerland, to all sorts of places, Copenhagen, and they always had a laugh together. So, and this was Pauline, his librarian, and wherever they went, they had stories. They would talk to people, but he talked to everybody. Everybody was his friend. This was my father in India in the year that he was in Ovel. So he was in Ovel, but there were he met some sheiks. You can't really tell the difference. That, you know, he became ambassador to Guinea, and this was welcome. He was consul, and he was welcoming the ambassador. And he was at home as well with a chassid from Meir Sharim. Wherever he was, he found friends. And he could network and talk, and always on the phone. And it didn't matter who was in the room. You never knew who was going to be there, because it was always different and always relevant. And really the pinnacle of the end, really, my father was already in the wheelchair. This was when the Queen had her Jubilee and they gave him.
Can you see?
Pardon?
And listen to what I say.
So I'd like to end up quoting my brother-in-law, David Goldberg, who wrote when, I think it's his memorial, he was to the end like a sun, which attracts to its orbit and warms by its presence, a host of different planets, and his life was peopled with a cast of characters who could have graced a movie or an opera, some of whom did actually. Jack lived in many and diverse worlds. There was the world of business, in which he helped to maintain relations with Soviet Russia, to develop the Aridor mine and to break the De Beers monopoly. There was the world of scholarship and of books, in which he created the finest private collection of Hebrew printed books in the world, a collection which I'm happy to say is to be preserved more or less intact as a resource for scholars in the National Library of Israel. There was the world of diplomacy. There were other worlds, the worlds of music, of horse riding, of skiing, of goodness knows how or why Scottish Highland games. And above all, there was always the Jewish world. Through all these worlds, equally at home in all of them, immensely polite, like an aristocrat with a faintly old-fashioned gentlemanly air, Jack moved with an easy grace, with charm, with a sense of mischief and fun, with wit, with the ability to speak in many tongues, and the inability to hear what he did not want to hear. And in these worlds, Jack met presidents and queens, government ministers and diplomats, stars of opera and of other performing arts, chiefs of industry, and not ever losing the common touch, working men and women, scholars, bibliophiles, and Haredim, to whom he spoke in Yiddish, and passers-by whom he stopped and charmed by a knowledge of, or purported knowledge of their home and place of birth. Jack knew the world was round because he'd been around it. The dust of nearly every nation was on the soles of his feet, and there are stories to be told, fables to tell about what he did and how he did it. It goes on a bit, but I don't think I have time for that. So David also spoke on his 70th birthday, and he said, as my own father taught me, the Pasha, he counted himself fortunate to have had Jack as a father-in-law. And as the poet has it, tired the sun with talking and sent him down the sky. I shall miss him, and I couldn't have had a better father-in-law. The Pasha also says how God carried Jewish people on eagle's wings. Jack carried all those who needed help and all those around him, and we dwelt in his midst and were comforted by his presence. And as the psalmist puts it, we feared neither the terror that walks by night nor the arrow that flies by day. Without him, the world is less fun, feels a little less safe, and feels altogether lonelier than it was. And I have to say, I feel that very strongly. Even today, there are so many memories, so many recalls, but one is from my father set huge standards, and one of them, a nephew, Timmy Lawson, wrote also, it's been a lot said about the end of the era because we come from this era of huge families all being together, and really we had one for all and all for one. And he couldn't, and I can't accept as the force of remarkable presence of Jack will stay in our lives forever. So we were brought up in an extended family by a committee consisting of parents, uncles, aunts, cousins, grandparents, and many who weren't even related but seemed to be busy in our lives. Approval, or usually disapproval, was given simultaneously by about 25 people and ranged from a degree of religious observance to the color of ties on Shabbat or outfits going to shul. So Timmy writes that he was 12 when there was an unanimous criticism of his tie at a Shabbat gathering. And he remembered he lost his temper and yelled that he'd had enough and he was walking out. He got a standing ovation, especially from Jack, who appreciated that anybody with a spark can fight. So as children, we grew up with 7 uncles and aunts from one side, 6 on the other side, grandparents, and umpteen cousins. And they all brought a different part of what we feel we can contribute to Jewish society today. And I hope we do them proud. Thank you.
Thank you, Mira. That was very interesting, fascinating, Father. Amazing. Thank you for your presentation.
What do you call it, a button holder.
I'd like to ask if anybody has any questions or comments, unmute yourself individually, please.
May I say that with us today is Mrs. Nygate. She was my father's secretary. Where are you? She was my father's secretary. Where is she? She's here somewhere. I know she is. And she was my father's secretary for umpteen years, and really his right hand. And without him, he would have found most things very difficult. Where are you?
I'm here, Mira.
There you are.
Margaret, and thank
There
you
you are.
very much for your lovely words. Thank you.
But she really kept everything together. Nice to see you here. Very nice.
Lovely to be here, and lovely to hear all the words again and see the photographs. And there are lots of photographs in the office, Margaret and Mira.
Okay.
Really,
I'll come and get them.
They're there. I don't, they should be where they were. Obviously, I'm not there anymore, but they are there, and I can tell them to get them ready for you.
Do you have any special memories?
Oh, so many memories. Oh my goodness.
Of all different nationalities, all converging in the office at the same time.
Absolutely. I could be sitting with him taking dictation, and the phone would go, and I could hear in the course of 15 minutes him speaking to people in probably 3 or 4 different languages, different people calling. And he, as you say, he was at home with everybody. No matter who, he made them feel comfortable, whether it was the cleaning lady in the office, or whether he was when he went to meet the Queen, he was equally at home with everybody. And I had great admiration working for him. I learned a lot from him. Very proud.
You were great, right till the end. You were wonderful.
He was a good man.
I'd like to add, he was a man that actually was incredibly modest. He didn't have any airs about him, although he was surrounded by, when he walked into a room, you really felt his presence. But if you would be sitting on the Heath bench, on the park bench, just walking by, he'd stop you and say, hello, do you like the trees here, or the daffodils, or whatever it was, and where do you come from? And they could come from Tipperary, and he'd say, oh, do you know such and such a street? And they would say, yeah, that was round the corner where we live. Why? How do you know? She said, well, I came from there too many years ago. And It could be Eastern Europe, it could be Spain, it could be Japan, it could be anywhere at all. And invariably, he knew something somewhere, and I don't know why, but his eyes would twinkle, and then they would say, well, what's your name? And he would say, Joe Smith. He would never want to say, I'm so-and-so.
I'd like to say something to Joseph, my nephew, Joe. I remember very well the day he was born, and Papa came home early from the office, and the first thing he did was to take the Chumash off the shelf and look at what would be your bar mitzvah parsha. I remember that. And then he sent roses to your grandmother, Devorah, and to Mama. And then he came to hospital to check that you really were a boy, because you were the first.
Don't worry, Joseph, I'm not going to tell the story post-bliss. But what he did do when he came to the hospital, he came with a little loop and shovel, and he said, now you need to get to it. So he was the first boy to be born in amongst all these girls. Margaret had had 2 girls, I'd had 1 girl, and finally Joe was born. And
you were like the miracle, we can do it.
Pardon?
I wanted to, Mira, the one thing that you forgot to talk about, there was the renovation of the shul in Antwerp.
Yeah, but
I suppose you're right, there's tons that we could talk about, but time is limited, and it's nearly Purim. Our Purim Sudas were the best thing in the world. I remember one year, my father dressed up as a nun, Ramsey Homer dressed up as Archbishop Macarius, and Aaron Lawson, our uncle, was an Auntie Sadie. And all the Meshulachim with their long beards come in and they can't find a man. Here's my father sitting as a nun. Ramsey is holding court as Archbishop Macarius with a crook, you know, his tall crook. And Uncle Aaron, the other Kazir, was sitting there dressed as Auntie Sadie. And these poor Meshulachim didn't have a clue where to go. I remember that. It was very funny. And Mira, there's a picture of Purim, and Mira's there very pretty next to Topsy. We've got thousands of memories. We could go on forever, but
Mira,
enough.
Mira, can the Val Madonna collection be seen anywhere? Is it open to the public?
Margaret,
it will be.
Not yet.
Can I add? I had the experience of seeing it probably the most recently. I have a friend who...
Who's Ruth, my daughter?
I'm Ruth, Mira's daughter. I have a friend who works at the National Library in Jerusalem. And out of the blue, I got a phone call from him to come and visit him at work. And I said, okay, why? And he said, I've got a surprise, you just come and see. And he took me around about a 45-minute tour of the whole library. And it really is a very, very special place. And if anybody gets a chance to go and visit, it's really quite amazing. But I got to, eventually he took me down a very long corridor and through a secret room, and he opened the room and I welled up. And he's like, what? And I saw one man sitting in this little room, stacks and stacks and stacks of old books, but the smell, it was the smell that hit me. The smell of the old books was just full. And if anybody remembers what the smell of my grandfather's little study was, or in fact his whole house, basically, it was an amazing smell. And I welled up, and the man who was sitting there looking and digitalizing, they're digitalizing every single page in each book at the moment, and that's what they're working on, so that it won't only be available to view, but actually online will be able for people to actually study from it and gain a lot of knowledge from. Amazing. And they're looking at every single book, and these tiny little books as well, and it was just a really incredible experience. So they are well and being very well taken care of at the moment, and hopefully one day they'll be available for view for everyone.
Lovely.
Can I just say something, please? Hello.
Hi.
My name is Francine, and I used to work as one of Mr. Jack's PAs way back in 1987 to 91.
What was
so
your
I have
maiden
many
name?
memories.
What was your maiden name?
Prager. I was Francine Prager.
Right. Oh.
Yes. So many. So believe me, you know, many memories. Listening to the talk,
What's okay?
I remember the times when your father was the honorary consul to Guinea, and he'd run upstairs and the flag would be put out. I remember him speaking to Roger Harkness himself about roses, and it was kind of very therapeutic for him in the middle of the day. Sort of, he was busy with business, and then suddenly he switched off and discussed roses. I remember Jeff Leggett and Marcel and Bella and Daisy having tea at Fairport, lots of things. And as Laurel said, the photo, I remember the family photo. It was amazing. Even all those years ago, I was so impressed to see such a beautiful photo. And I remember the librarian, Pauline, and Brad Sabin Hill, who worked with Mr. Jack, all sorts of people. Yes, and his funny letters as well. The funny letters that he wrote to people, hilarious.
So Charles will also remember a lot of it. So when Gillian asked if I would talk, she wanted me to talk about the library, but there was so much more to him than the library. But the only thing that I didn't dare mention the Westminster Talmud this time. I don't know I'm sure there'll be another time to mention it, but I would just like to say that you've all heard about this amazing purchase that he had, but he found it. It was on the way back from Africa. He was, in those days, he'd not taken the flight on the Friday because he couldn't get back in time for Shabbos. So he took the Sunday flight, and the Times of Friday was there, and he noticed an announcement of a purchase that he had been waiting for all the years, for about 25 years, to see that he could do a swappie with the Westminster Abbey to be able to get the Westminster Talmud.
Okay, what happened was that on the plane, he saw an article that H.P. Krauss, who was a dealer in New York, had bought the charter of Edward the Confessor to Westminster Abbey. This was something that he knew that Westminster Abbey would be interested in buying because it was about their origin, and that was more important to them than anything because they refused to relinquish the Talmud till that time. Now you can carry on.
Okay, my mother had just died, and he came back to London. He was really incredibly excited. I mean, unbelievable. He didn't really show his emotions much, did he, Laurel? Wouldn't really give much away, but he was really, you could see he was worked up about it. And it took several months, but finally we all went. He hired cars. Did you come, Laurel?
No, I wasn't there then. I didn't join till 2001.
Okay. There were the 5 of us girls.
Not Alison. She was in Harvard.
Mira, we're going to have to finish soon. Can you just finish this story? Because I know it's very exciting.
Okay, so all of us went.
I was there.
Who was there?
I was there.
You were there?
He came and collected me in the Mulliner.
Ah, okay.
In my office in the Mulliner, and I went to collect it with him. And the interesting thing was he was so excited, and the Dean of Westminster couldn't give a damn about the Talmud, but he was equally excited about the charter. He was very excited. He was governor of North London.
But I mean, this is what it means to be an entrepreneur. I tried to give an example that you can't do it on your own. Everything is with others around you. You can aim for it, you can drive yourself and so on, but all of it is about communicating. And my father, if nothing else, was the archetype communicator with anyone all the time. He loved people. And very often we could feel not excluded, but we were like pushed to the side because he knew we would have him.
Anyway.
He was ours, but we should share him. And I will finish with one story about both Purim and Hanukkah, is that you give out gelt, you know, you give out money. And I used to be annoyed. We would land up in shul and he would give envelopes to whomever, to the kids and whatever it was. And he never gave to us. And it really peeved me. It really did. It was really annoying and I didn't understand why. And I've just thought of one more thing about shul, is on Sukkot, he would buy the smallest lulav and the smallest etrog. And I always felt embarrassed and ashamed about it. Why so small? And he wouldn't tell us, but he was going into Russia and he would pack the lulav and esrog because it was at the time of the diamond auctions and he would go and leave the lulav and esrog in Achipova Street in a special place that he'd organized with a rabbi so that they would have a lulav and esrog for Sukkot. And when my uncles would go into Leningrad, my mother always made a kiddush for them on their way back. So those are just the stories where foreign travel and languages and communicating and all of that was an integral part of him teaching us how to live, how to be, how it is. So that's why I chose the title, The Intrepid Entrepreneur.
Mira, that was a fascinating story. Thank you so much. We all appreciate it. We could go on for hours.